Hi, I'm Greg, and welcome to another episode of Passion of the Geeks Unplugged. Usually, Pat and I talk about geek and pop culture and everything else we enjoy, but sometimes there are things that only one of us is an expert in. This is what Passion of the Geeks Unplugged is for. Shorter, unedited, straight to the point. Unplugged. So this week I'm going to do something special, and it's probably going to be the start of a series that maybe not will take us through summer. I just recently finished oral matura exams, so I'm the examinator in that scenario. So I had to read a few books. I reread a few books just to be sure that I basically can do good exams with my students. And I thought, some of these books I prepared, they're actually quite good, and maybe some of our listeners are interested in these books as well, and maybe why you should read them. So, as I said, there are many books I read, and I try to come up with some system of categorizing them a little bit. So today, in this first episode of Greg's Book Club number 1, I'm going to talk about some classics and why you should read them, even though there are classics and maybe you think, oh, why should I read such an old book? Some of them are really good, and I'm going to give you 5 examples. There are others, but I decided to stick to 5 because, I don't want these to be too long, and it's very hot outside, and quick and dirty. This is Unplugged after all. So let's dive straight in. First book I would like to mention is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald from 1925. It's probably the most famous book about the Roaring Twenties there is. Mick Calloway, the narrator, tells the story of Gatsby and Gatsby's pursuit of the American dream. Or maybe Gatsby is just pursuing a woman. Not really sure what you want to call this. Gatsby is in love with Daisy, Tom's cousin, and she lives across the river in West Egg. And Daisy, and this is actually one thing I would really like to talk about when it comes to this novel. Daisy is Gatsby's green light. She's his dream, and under the watchful eyes of an advertisement, tragedy unfolds. And let's be honest, it's mostly Daisy's fault. And as I said, this green light, the watchful eyes, and the Valley of the Ashes, it's actually these are the main reasons why I really like this novel. You could argue that Fitzgerald's use of symbolism is maybe a little bit on the nose, but it definitely works for me. The green light, the Valley of the Ashes, the watchful eyes that are part of a billboard, they really mean something. And these details actually enhance the story. And even though sometimes symbolism in a novel can be a hard thing for people to wrap their head around it, I really think it works very well here. And definitely check out The Great Gatsby for a novel with an interesting story, some compelling characters, even though some of these women are bad. And let's be honest, Calloway and Gatsby, they're no saints either. That really works when you look at some of the details. So highly recommend Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I'm keeping it chronologically. The second novel, or in this case novella might be the better word for it, is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck from 1937. This is a book, in one way it's always surprising why students like this. But then again, not really, because it's really good. But this is one of those cases where just on paper it should work. Why would teenagers, or today's teenagers, be interested in the story of George and Lenny, 2 farmhands trying to find their luck during the Great Depression? I mean, nothing is further away from their reality. So this should work, but I'm not sure if it's Lenny's innocence or kind of the tragic story that works. But at the end of the day, I think it boils down to specificity. Specificity is kind of an interesting concept in literature and movies or whatever, because I think the way Steinbeck describes the character, or his descriptions of the world, the characters, their very specific story is actually what makes it universal. by following Lenny's and George's tragic pursuit of their dream, their American dream, slight connection to Great Gatsby, we learn something about ourselves and the kind of the nature of pursuing dreams. So, yeah, the more specific you make something, the more universal it gets. Or to phrase it the other way around, if you really want to tell a story that can appeal to a large audience, make it specific. Yeah. Of Mice and Men, it's a very short read. You can basically read it in the afternoon. There is a nice a side in there about rabbits on a farm. But yeah, Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, highly recommended. Third novel, and we're back in novel territory, is 1945's Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Let's just start by saying that I hate Holden, and I think you're supposed to. Holden is a strange and very unlikable character. The choices he makes are stupid. All his decisions are silly. The way he approaches the world is just baffling. And, I mean, yeah, obviously he's not a villain, but kind of putting villains aside, he's probably one of the most unlikable characters in all of our literature. Yeah, don't hold me to that. He's self-obsessed. He's vulgar. He's rude. He's entitled. Yeah, he's a teenager. And sure, I'm exaggerating a little bit with Holden being every prototypical teenager, but it's not that far from it, because I have to admit there are some aspects of Holden where I can see myself in. And that's the same for teenagers today as well. I mean, obviously we don't have the same problems as Holden, because yeah, he has baggage. He has baggage. And what Salinger manages to do with him as a character is kind of truly capture the psyche of an adolescent. And this is even more impressive when you consider that the novel was written in 1945. And I think the language does a large part of this, because yeah, it's language from 1945, but it still Holden sounds like a teenager sounds today. Maybe the slang hasn't changed, or maybe teenagers haven't changed, but yeah, that's very impressive. So if you want to be annoyed by a teenager, but maybe learn a little bit along the way about how bad you were as a teenager, Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger is definitely a book to check out. Moving on, number 4, 1984 by George Orwell, published in 1949. And I contemplated writing this little part about 1984 in Newspeak, but then I decided against it because, yeah, Newspeak is ungood. George Orwell, probably one of the most influential writers of the 20th century, and I consider having an adjective coined after you kind of evidence of this. If that's not enough, there's also this ungood, or maybe even double plus ungood show that uses a phrase from 1984, but let's not get into that. So, obviously, 1984 has a story. Winston kind of starting to rebel against the government, falling in love with Julia, trying to find the head of the rebellion. But I think what sets 1984 apart is actually not the story, it's the world building. And I'm not trying to devalue the story. It's an important part of it, and it gets us through the world. But the things that stay behind are the telescreens, Big Brother, Newspeak, the Ministry of Truth, and the Ministry of Love, and all these crazy things. Orwell was definitely not a prophet, because the roots of everything he describes were actually there when he wrote it. Politics were already trying to control media, especially Nazi Germany. Fascism and totalitarianism was on the rise, or did rise, and was responsible for World War II. But kind of the idea that how should I put it? But are we sure that, I always thought it was supposed to be, kind of a cautionary tale. And I'm not sure Orwell meant it as a blueprint. Because when you look around today, and there's so many reasons during the last few years to bring up Orwellian in 1984 again, and not just in silly Apple commercials from the 80s. I mean, every time one of these silly right-wing leaders does something or tries to tell the people, no, there were more people at my inauguration than anyone else's, we see this idea that, there's a political system, there's a political party, and they try to make us see things differently. Alternative facts, fake news, and so on. So 1984, it should be a cautionary tale and not a blueprint. Maybe if more people read it, we still have a chance. Last but not least, 1960s To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. She only published one other book in 2015, Ghost at a Watchman. But let's not get into that story because apparently that's highly problematic. Let's just focus on To Kill a Mockingbird. I think it's really crazy that a 60-year-old book about racism in Alabama still feels current. The book is about the Finch family, Atticus, a German scout, and Atticus is defending a black man called Tom Robbins, an innocent black man who's accused of a horrible crime. I have to admit, from today's point of view, there are some elements of this novel that are a little bit problematic. Kind of the whole idea of a white savior, because basically Atticus is defending Tom just to feel good, or just for us to see that Atticus is a better person than all the other people living in the town of Macomb, Alabama. But considering that it depicts the 1930s in Alabama, the depiction is actually, or probably spot on. Never lived there, so I don't know. But what I think sets the novel apart, and why I think you should still read it, it's not about the court case. It's actually the very beautiful coming-of-age story. Scout is a very interesting choice for a narrator, and the core message of the book, kind of that still resonates with me today, the idea of empathy and how empathy should and can be a powerful thing. So, to paraphrase the novel, I actually think it is a good idea to walk around in someone else's shoes, because you might learn something. And the prose of this novel is also quite well. So these were 5 novels for you to read. I'll probably do another one of these with 5 other ones, so you better get your summer reading going. Next week we're probably back with next week we're back with a full episode. Our last one before we take a little summer break. But so this is it for this week. Please like, share, and subscribe to our little podcast here. We're on all major podcasting services and on www.passionofthegeeks.com. You can send in questions, declarations of love, and all other things to passionofthegeeks@gmail.com. And we're also on Twitter @passionotgeeks. Take care.